Good evening, everybody. Happy Friday. It is Friday, March 21st, 2025, and we are back on the channel once again to talk severe weather. We're not talking tropics this time. We're going to be talking severe weather and what the pattern could look like as we wander through the back end of March. We only have about 9-10 days left of the month, and then we are already into April, which is unbelievable to even try to wrap your mind around. The fact that time is just moving by as quick as it is. It is already March 21st. March is pretty much done at this point. Unless you have any spectacular plans coming up over the next 7 to 10 days, we are already going to begin looking at the month of April. And that's precisely what we're going to do here. We're going to talk about the active pattern that we have in place coming down the pike for the next 7 days of March, as well as what a very early introduction to April could look like. So thank you all so much for taking some time out of your Friday evening. I don't expect very many people to tune in tonight. I'm going to kind of just blast through this, get the information out there, and then if you'd like to view this after the fact, feel free to do so. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. This is a look at our infrared satellite shot over the United States. We have a couple of different storm systems out there. We have this big old thing out there over the central northern Atlantic. That was the previous storm system from back last week, this time last week, the severe weather maker for the Midwest, the lower Great Lakes, and then eventually it turned into a deep south, southeast, east coast severe weather event. Then back behind it, we have the one that just moved through that also produced a round of severe weather for the lower Great Lakes and the Midwestern states. Very textbook location for the spring severe weather season. Then we have another perturbation working through the pattern right in through there, kind of moving through that same general spot, following the jet stream out through Montana, the Dakotas, southern Minnesota, and now currently working through Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and so on and so forth. Garden variety weather with this, not expecting any severe weather. There's nothing really a whole lot to it, to tell you the truth. It's this one back behind it that's now moving into the Pacific Northwest, California, and Nevada. You can already see the digging jet stream moving its way into southern Oregon, northern California. That is likely to produce another severe weather event for the south and east. How much of that makes its way further off towards the east remains to be seen. This doesn't seem like it's going to be a very potent system, enough to pack just a bit of a punch in terms of the deep south, tap into some of the warmth and instability that's coming in out of the Gulf, over Texas, the southern plains, Dixie Alley, the deep south, and I'm not anticipating it's really going to make its presence known too much further to the east from there. Good evening. The few folks joining in right now: La Jr., Mr. Man JJ, JTG Herman, pleasure to have you with us, and Dark Steve, hello there. Here's a bit of a closer look at the water vapor now. We're looking at the mid-level water vapor satellite. There's that next trough in question. Let me bring my pen back. This is our next trough in question, working its way through the west coast right now, and it is expected to develop into another area of low pressure as it comes down off the lee of the Rockies, somewhere where that current little vortex is on the satellite right there. Let me change the color of the ink so you can see. There's a bit of a spin right there, an upper level spin, and you can see out ahead of it, supported by a little bit of a jet max moving over Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, creating some cloud, maybe some showers up in that general area. This is the one that we're going to be watching over the next 3 days. We already have a level 2 out of 5 risk for the deep south over Louisiana, Arkansas, parts of Mississippi, and up into Tennessee, Kentucky. Apologize. I don't know what's going on with my voice. I just had a sneezing fit before this, so I'm going to try to not pay any attention to that. Here's a look at Storm Prediction Center's Day 3 outlook. We have that level 2 risk that runs from southwest Tennessee through to the eastern periphery of Texas. It does encompass much of Arkansas, the lower right, or I should say the lower half, right half, cutting it diagonally in half, the state of Arkansas, the upper periphery of Louisiana, and then a large chunk of northern and western Mississippi. Then we have an outer-lying level 1 risk from southern Kentucky through Tennessee, Alabama, the rest of Mississippi, Louisiana, and back in through Texas and Arkansas. It looks like Kansas, Oklahoma are going to dodge the bullet on this one. This system's going to kind of take its time to develop. We don't have extreme amounts of instability. We don't have a ripping jet stream at 500 or 300 millibars. It is going to take on a bit of a negative tilt, and that's why it will give enough oomph to the atmosphere to kind of stir the pot just a little bit. And then from there, that's about it. If I switch us over to the actual Storm Prediction Center website, whoops, let me not go ahead and fat finger things in the middle of a stream. We'll go to the SPC forecast, and we'll go to the extended outlook. And you can see that there really isn't much of a potential for days 4, 5, and 6, but then by 7, we start to get back into the predictability too low. And for those of you not incredibly familiar with the way Storm Prediction Center operates, predictability means that the threat is there. However, right now we're a little too far out. Models are not quite in agreement enough for them to plaster any kind of severe weather probabilistic outlook, especially that far out beyond a week time frame. So we're going to keep watching. I'm going to take you through exactly what it is that I'm seeing that could result in some active severe weather. So here's a look at the latest European model from 12 Zulu. This is that weak system that's out there right now. And if you look, a very diffuse jet over top the upper Midwest, the lower Great Lakes, the Central Plains, not too much in the way of diffluent flow spreading of the air out ahead of it to create lift or upward vertical velocities. And I also do think because of the fact that we just had a front come through, we have surface high pressure over this east and southeast United States, and as a result, we're pretty stable. We're probably in what's called an inverted atmosphere out in that quadrant of the world. Then you can already see on the left-hand side of your screen right here, we have that next 500 millibar jet max that's going to begin to build in, and if I take the clock forward ever so slightly, there it is. You can see it cutting through the pattern, moving through northern Idaho, Montana, through the front range of Wyoming. Looks like a textbook downsloping wind event for Wyoming and the Colorado front range. Could see anywhere between 30 to 40 knot winds in association with that cross barrier flow that's moving through there. And that's precisely why we're expecting genesis of another low pressure, the development of an area of low pressure over the central and northern plains, because you can see as the air crosses over the higher terrain features, what it does is it warms as it comes down the lee of the mountains. It's called adiabatic warming. It drops down into the central plains, much lower in altitude. I was going to say atmosphere. Literally, it is much lower in altitude, and because we're warming and drying out, that's where it creates the bit of vorticity and spin, and it creates localized low pressure. You get a solid jet overhead, and you create a little bit of temperature discontinuity, and that's what develops, as you can see here, into a fairly prevalent storm system. This one definitely for this Sunday into Monday and Tuesday of next week we'll have to watch, because you can see it does start to take on a bit of that negative orientation in the upper levels. There's your cold pocket aloft over Minnesota, Wisconsin. Excellent diffluent quadrant of the jet stream, just back behind a bit of an upper ridge that's positioned over the eastern Great Lakes, the Appalachians, and the mid-Atlantic coast. And then we still have a pretty solid finger of jet stream energy digging into the base of that trough. So I am anticipating we are going to see a severe weather risk with this. This is the one that we're going to have unfolding for Sunday. They have it down here in the south where most of our instability is, but I would not be surprised if we get some more general thunderstorms up into Kentucky, Indiana, and Illinois, just based on what jet dynamics and the orientation of the pattern we have in the upper levels. If I switch us over to the actual Cape, you can see using our most unstable Cape, let me go back. We're starting to get the 18Z model running. Let's go forward in time to Sunday. This is Saturday. We're starting to see that return flow building in over Texas and Oklahoma. And then finally into Sunday, notice that that instability does start to extend up into the lower Midwest, southern base of Illinois, Indiana, the western halves of Kentucky and Tennessee, and then down across the south, the southern plains and the deep south. That's where your more robust values are. I believe I have it pulled up elsewhere, but I'm going to go ahead and just take you on down in so you can see. There you go. So some decent values. You know, we're getting late into March and early April, which means we can start to transition to the higher Cape values that we typically look for severe weather. These are optimal. These are definitely optimal. It does not look like the threat is really going to extend too far to the north, but we can't rule out some heavier rainfall and thunderstorms for the lower Midwestern states, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, previously mentioned. I do think the actual severe risk, the bona fide severe risk, is going to stop in Arkansas, Mississippi, whereabouts they have it highlighted by that level 2 risk for Sunday. And then down further to the south, you can see those robust values into southern and eastern Texas. Not anticipating severe weather activity down there because we just don't have a trigger. We don't have a trigger, unfortunately. Well, I should say fortunately, but in terms of all that instability left behind just hanging out there, we don't have a trigger to set it off and kind of take advantage of getting rid of it. And then as we go further in time, if you notice, that instability down there just kind of bubbles up. It piles up over southern Texas, so it's going to be hot and humid down there as all that cape begins to rush ashore. And then notice the values over Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, and further towards the east begin to diminish because our thunderstorms do begin to fire, take advantage of the moisture, the relevant dew points we have down there, as well as the lift provided by that digging jet max that's going to be moving across the central portions of the United States. So if you notice where my arrow is drawn, we just don't have much of a lifting mechanism down here. We could have some daytime showers and storms, but nothing prolific or severe weather producing because our upper level trigger or instigator is going to be further towards the north. Now, let's take you back out to a zoomed out perspective. This is what I'm watching down the road. If you notice the timestamp, we've jumped ahead about 5 days. This is where we get the predictability is too low from Storm Prediction Center because the models are very finicky with this storm system, but this is one of the ones I've been watching for the last couple of days. It's been trending on both the GFS and the Euro. Now that both of them go far enough out in time, and you can see extending all the way down to the central upper Gulf, we have a pretty good line of rainfall that could be associated with a developing area of low pressure, as the thumbnail of this live stream alluded to. And then beyond that, it continues to stretch out and move across the eastern United States, hopefully providing us with some beneficial rain. I really don't see this as a severe weather event for us. Obviously, based on what we have here right now, it doesn't look like much, but obviously we are definitely far enough out in time to where we could see some adjustments in this. If I switch over to the 500 millibar flow, notice not much with it. Oh, shoot, hold on a second. Keeps auto-designating to 12Z. I don't want to go back. I mean, to 18Z. There it is. So, you know, a nice bit of diffluence there, not the most outstanding. Tiny, compact jet max moving through the pattern just enough to kind of spur some significant weather, whether it be moderate thunderstorms or we do actually get the severe weather. But the big thing here is we will have that return flow and the instability and the moisture available. If I switch over to the dew points, really solid dew point channel all the way up to the Michigan Peninsula, the lower Great Lakes. You can see really good dew point discontinuity down right in through Arkansas, the Dixie Alley area down into southern Texas. And then if I switch us over to our Cape, it is reflected there gloriously. You can see a really good channel there of instability that continues all the way through the East Coast and across Florida, too. We have some pretty decent values. So we'll have to see exactly what that system does and how much of a punch it packs as it moves through our pattern. You can see on the simulated IR, simulated infrared, it doesn't look all that impressive. It's a very small cluster of significant weather. Does hang out in that same general spot, Dixie Alley, as always. We could have some severe thunderstorms, and then down the road, we get another little batch as another weak finger of the jet races through the pattern, more or less trying to couple between the polar front jet to the north and what we have of the subtropical jet down towards the south. So that's naturally why both here and here we typically get a lot of the severe weather at this time. If I go ahead and change the ink or the color of the ink, we have our low-level moisture, our low-level feed of all that good stuff we need for thunderstorms, and then the pink shading here will be your upper-level triggers, your upper-level influences that combine down at the lowest portions of the atmosphere to help bring this stuff into fruition. And I know that we're rapid firing through this. Forgive me if I missed any of your chat or any of your comments. Barbara, welcome in. Carmen, good to see you. PM, good to see you as well. Thanks so much for tuning in. Very intimate crowd tonight. Like I said at the very start of the stream, if you're still watching, I'm going to try to blast through this. We're not going to spend very much time on this. I'm more or less just providing you all with that content, trying to tickle the algorithm a little bit. So if you are watching and you're still watching up to this point, we're 13 minutes deep. Feel free to nudge that like button a little bit. Consider clicking subscribe if you are being recommended this video. You're probably not, and I don't say that negatively, but I know YouTube is not on our side currently, so that's why I'm in here putting in the work to get some information out to you guys. This is the 18Z GFS. The 18Z GFS is still populating. You can see our first little batch of severe weather getting underway as we go through late in the day on Sunday into very early morning Monday. And then the front loses a lot of its power as it gets into the Appalachians, moves into the mid-Atlantic. Could still see some snow up there near the Great Lakes where we're still cold. We're still right around that freezing level. And then as we fast forward a bit further in time, you can see the GFS is also picking up on that next weather system. I'm surprised the 18Z has not. Let me refresh this. We have to have more of the 18Z than that. There we go. The 18Z GFS is also picking up on that next storm system with a huge swath of rainfall, showers, potential thunderstorms embedded within the warm sector of this system. Not as impressive with the Cape, though, if you look. The Cape only begins to surge after the feature has already moved downstream. You can see right here where we have our strongest Cape values over Texas, Louisiana, familiar territory. If I switch us back to the actual sea level pressure, note the system's already way off towards the northeast, getting into southern Ontario and Quebec at this point. So we are very much so out of phase. We don't have a lot of nudging going on over the deep south. A lot of that action is now way far off towards the east, so we're just not missing, or I should say we're missing that coupling. We're missing the forcing happening at all levels at the same time. You need everything to kind of sync up to get all that stuff underway. And then the GFS is also thinking we're going to have some weak perturbations drifting through the pattern. This feature right here is super interesting to me, and I'll show you why. This feature here is extremely interesting, and I'm not talking because of the snow or the fact that it's a Hatteras low that develops. It's just at 12Z, since we're in La La Land, after about 275 hours to 300 plus hours of the GFS, that's where, as we all know, it starts to do some very wonky things. And I'll show you that here in a moment. Now, looking long range, before we get ready to get towards the tail end of this briefing, and I'll take some questions, and then we'll wrap up. Kevin Hawthorne, good to see you. Nice to have you joining us from over on the Just Weather /News 6 channel as well. Cynthia from St. Martin, thanks so much for tuning in. Kevin Rivera, great to see you. Linda and Brooke, thanks so much for tuning in, folks. So looking down the road, at the very beginning of April, if you notice, we're expected to slip into a pretty dominant negative PNA, which typically means we're going to be warming up big time over the eastern half of the United States. We'll have dominant ridging in place from the Great Plains all the way through to the Atlantic coast. And then on top of that, I'll switch over to the GFS ensemble to show you the GFS does also pinpoint at exactly the same time that PNA, that positive, or I should say that negative phase change. I don't know why I'm getting my words garbled right now. Between the positive and the negative phase of our PNA, which essentially, if I were to draw a very rough United States right there, extremely rough, we'll have troughing out west and a ridge out east. This would be your your negative PNA pattern. Right now we have troughing. If you notice, we're in the positive phase, so we have the trough out over the eastern half of the United States, which is why it's noticeably cooler, more stable out here. Even in Central Florida, we still have our winds going, and I think the high temperatures today barely made it up into the upper 60s after the front we had come through late yesterday evening. On top of that, if you look, the NAO is also in a positive phase right now, which is likely responsible for the trough getting stuck over the eastern United States. We have a dominant pressure pattern over the North Atlantic Ocean, but it is also anticipated to weaken and go into a negative phase just in time for April 1st, if you can see there at the bottom, according to the time phase chart at the bottom on the y-axis of this chart. Or no, I'm sorry, the x-axis and the bottom portion of the chart here. So with the negative PNA beginning to form up, and we get that dominant warming over the eastern half of the United States, and then a weakening trend of our NAO to allow systems to start moving through the pattern, we could see a fairly busy first half of April, first true signal of spring, as systems continue to race through the United States, bringing us severe weather, if not thunderstorm after thunderstorm after thunderstorm event moving down the road. Here's a closer look. I did bring this up just for shoots and giggles. You can see here that for this event coming up on Sunday, we do have a pretty good line of thunderstorms that are expected to form. The European model does also think we could get some thunderstorm action up there in Illinois and Indiana, even though it isn't highlighted by Storm Prediction Center. I'm not ruling it out. I do think we can see a little bit of action up there, maybe nothing intense or anything dangerous. That is probably going to be confined more so to the Dixie Alley, Texarkana, and Deep South region here. So I did see in the chat just a second ago, yeah, Louisiana is probably going to see some severe weather, but nothing really as detrimental as we've seen the last couple of events where we've had the level 3s, dare I say the level 5 that had just gone through. Nothing like that. These systems are a bit weaker in nature, and you can see we are going to be watching the thunderstorms making their way towards the coastline as we go through the very early morning hours of Monday. So Sunday, second half of the day, during the first half of Monday after that, is when our severe weather event is expected to go down. This was also just a quick glance at where our surface cape and our most unstable cape will be in relation to where our thunderstorms and our lifting mechanisms are going to get in place. And you can see, it kind of gets up there into southern Illinois, southern Indiana, kind of encompasses much of western Kentucky, and then Tennessee, where our level 2 risk extends, kind of like this right now. That's where Storm Prediction Center has us covered down. But I do think that anywhere in this general area, we can get general thunderstorms, garden variety, gusty winds and thunderstorms, pockets of heavier rainfall, and then naturally there is that chance for severe weather in the form of very isolated tornadoes, the damaging winds in excess of 50 to 60 miles an hour, and then the small inch hail, or I should say the large hail, small to large 1-inch hail. Now, I just want to bring this up for shoots and giggles because it is way too early for this, and then we're going to wrap up the live stream. So this is the 12Z GFS. We're at hour 210, and we're going to go out to 275. Like I said, at about 275 is when the GFS starts to do its weird stuff. It just has fun. Chaos theory in full effect, and the model just kind of goes and does whatever it wants. If I go into early April, hold on to your butts. We are already starting to see these phantom systems popping up on the GFS, which is, in my opinion, pretty bizarre. Because I know the GFS typically loves to have fun with these rogue spin-ups at the very tail end of its model runs. By the time we get into May, and then naturally June, July, so on and so forth. So to see this out here in the month of March into early April is very interesting. It makes me personally feel like we're really going to have to watch this general area as we go through the month of April and then especially May before the initiation of the calendar hurricane season by June 1st. So no, for folks who may possibly be discovering this channel, we are fast forwarded to 342 hours. I am not putting any leverage or bet into this thingamajiggy to the north of the Yucatan Peninsula forming up. So don't play with my words. I know somebody in the last live stream mentioned that apparently I was very hypey last hurricane season, and I told him, no, take that negativity somewhere else. What I'm pointing out here, just like during our last tropical update with that yellow blip we had in the central Atlantic, is even though we're in the chaos theory phase of the model, 300 plus hours out, you should never trust it at that point. It is very interesting to see that somewhere, somehow, in all the data that the GFS grabbed hold of, it thought to develop, whether it be a convective-initiated or a biased type of storm system. It brings a little bit of a tropical cyclone down there into the Gulf. So, not saying that's going to happen, but it is something worth mentioning because it's far too early for this. Usually the GFS doesn't start to latch on to the feedback and the weird stuff until conditions are a bit more conducive for it to start spitting out its phantom storms. And for us to start seeing this in the middle to late portions of March as we just entered the spring season, that's interesting. At least in my opinion, it's very interesting. It's at the tail end of a front. You can see here there's a front there. It goes stationary just to the Florida Straits, to the Bahamas, and then we have our area of low pressure that forms right on the tail end. So is this a doable solution? Yeah, it definitely is. Is it the most likely outcome? Definitely not. And I always like to use that phrase to encapsulate what it is that we talk about on this channel. Is it a doable solution? Yes. You get over warm water, and that's right over the 27, or I should say the 26, 27 degree Charlie water. And I also looked at the shear and the actual moisture in that general area. If you look at 700 to 300, decent moisture channel out there. And then if you look at the actual shear anomaly here, it's not as bad as it has been. So obviously not the most likely outcome, but is it a doable solution? Yeah. Yeah, it is, and that's something we'll continue to watch as we go through the month of April, and then once we start our recurring tropical updates in May, we'll keep looking for signals like that. And then naturally, at hard charges for the Texas coastline, just for fun, we'll go ahead and track it through to its landfall. Obviously, if you're out there in Texas watching this right now, please don't panic. I'm not putting any stock in this whatsoever. But it is also worth noting that 2017 is one of our greatest analogs, and in 2017, we had a named storm in April. So, I wouldn't even say a non-tropical low. I'm not putting any stock in this. I don't think we're going to see anything down there. Could we have areas of low pressure developing through the upper Gulf Coast? Absolutely, but I don't put any faith in this. This would be more of a tropical or I should say, yeah, it would definitely be more of a tropical perturbation at this point because it would marinate over those warmer waters and take on the thunderstorm characteristics we would see with a bona fide seedling of a tropical cyclone. But please don't put any faith in this. Don't go starting to post this or plaster it everywhere and then mention that, Weather Center Nazario is forecasting a tropical cyclone. I am not trying to cover my bases on that department. I just find it very interesting that it's this early in the year and the GFS is already hitting us with these rogue ghost systems. It typically doesn't do that until we're in, if not close enough to the hurricane season. And I remember last year, this didn't really happen at all. We didn't get any rogue cyclones in March. It wasn't until early May. I remember briefing you guys all that the GFS and the CFS were starting to show random things happening out there through the Caribbean and the Gulf. April Brooks with the sand dust storm fun fact. That is true. They are very common. Yes, silver steel S, it is much warmer than normal. That's why I mentioned it's funny because where this thing technically starts to get going right there is where we have our feed of 26 to 27 degree Charlie water temperatures, which is 78 to about 81 degrees Fahrenheit, which is what you need. So, like I said, is it a doable solution? It is. Is it the most likely outcome? No, not even close. But all right. That's all she wrote, everybody. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the live stream. And oh, by the way, just so everybody knows, out of curiosity, on 18Z, it's gone. So like I said, don't put any faith in that. I'll go ahead and show that for you. 18 Zulu, absolutely nothing. So if you do see anybody promoting it or anybody making a video on it, don't believe it because it's gone already. That's the classic... It's the classic GFS fake out, bait and switch. That would have technically been a tropical cyclone. Yeah, technically. At 12 Zulu. You can see it right there. Bam. Forming at the very tail end of a front and then pulling back towards the northwest. So yeah, technically speaking, that would have been a tropical cyclone, but it's not going to happen. And if it does, then hold on to your butts. But alrighty, everybody. Unless there are any questions, that will wrap up the live stream. That's all she wrote. We've got a couple different severe weather makers we're going to be tracking over the next couple weeks. I'm going to try to start to put out more routine content. Today was a signal of that. I'm going to try to keep them a bit shorter, though. I don't want to inundate the channel with hour-plus live streams anymore unless we're actually covering a live event. It's the only time. So from here on out, expect our live streams to run 20, 30, 35 minutes max, and then I'm capping it. Oh, also, by the way, I was talking to my buddy Jonathan about this earlier. Let me pull up one last thing, and I promise, and then we're done. So if you have questions, drop them in the chat while I'm pulling it up right now. But our hurricane analog chart just recently updated once again. And take a look at that. It's matching up with our theories. Mid-Atlantic, Northeast showing the hot spots. And then look at that, the Eastern Gulf showing that really good organized cluster of tropical cyclone storm tracks. The frequency. This just recently updated once again. I pulled this up and I shared it with Jonathan, and I'll zoom it in for you guys so you can see before we fully close out the live stream. I just wanted to pull this up as a how goes it. And if you've been watching the channel since we've started discussing 2025, I've been saying East Coast is going to have to watch, and I think the eastern half of the Gulf of Mexico could possibly be a hot spot. And if you look, our analogs and the charts that Tropical Tidbits will automatically disseminate is starting to show the same thing, and we're only going to improve on the analogs as we get closer, because we're already getting close to April, so it's funny. So we're not out to lunch in our suspicions and our little theories we like to throw together as we get closer in time. Oh, Kevin, I didn't even notice you in the chat. Great to have you with us. I hope all is well. I really do. I hope all is well and you've been taking strides in the recovery process because I know it's been slow and steady. Mr. Man JJ, I will not say that there has been a pronounced westward shift just because we only have one climate run. We only have one climate run so far. March, there was a marked difference in our pressure patterns and our general winds out there across the Atlantic, into the Caribbean and the Gulf. I'm really, really, really anxious to see if this stuff sticks as we get all of our data in for the month of April, or if we see any changes in our named storm frequency, our general forecasted ACE, and so on and so forth. Especially with the European seasonal model. Because the Euro in February was thinking El Nino, decent El Nino from about September, October through to wintertime. Now it's backed off on that, and I think that's also probably why it's showing a bit of a more pronounced Bermuda-Azores high, more dominant North Atlantic oscillation, and more of the precip signals through the Caribbean and into the Eastern Gulf. So I'm very curious to see if that's a trend that sticks, if we keep the neutral to the cool neutral as we roll through April, and if the other models or the other model parameters begin to adjust as well. And oh yeah, the analogs will always keep changing based on what the overall configuration of the atmosphere and the ocean looks like. So they're constantly adjusting and constantly updating based on what sea surface temperatures do, sea surface temp anomalies, what teleconnections like ENSO, the PDO, the NAO, the PNA, the IOD, all those fun, fancy jargon terms that I can go over with you at a later time. But yeah, I just find it interesting that as we get closer, it's starting to pick up on what we've been putting down out here. Nice recurvature signal and then some action in the southeast and up the east coast. So we shall see. But alrighty, everybody, we will go ahead and see you next time. Be on the lookout for the notification of an upcoming live stream. Make sure you have your notifications turned on. And if somehow this video finds you, please, if you could be so kind, hit that like button, share this information, and definitely consider subscribing if you are brand spanking new to the channel, or if you've tuned in from time to time and have contemplated on it. It would mean a lot for you to join the community together with us as we track what severe weather season has in store for us, and then into the hurricane season come June, and so on and so forth. And yes, Kevin Rivera, the AI model did fairly well for itself last year. It did really good with Milton, that's for sure. It did really good with Milton, so I'm going to be watching that going forward as well. Barbara, you're very welcome. Kevin, prayers for us all this year. I totally agree. Daniel Schwartz, you're very welcome. Claire, you're very welcome. Mr. Man JJ, of course, it's my pleasure. Carmen, so thankful to have you in the chat, still sticking around. You're very welcome. And we will talk to you all again very soon. Drop me a comment in the comment section down below if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. Upon the conclusion of this live stream, have a phenomenal Friday night. And until next time, you know the saying, this is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.